Now it's time for Pound for Pound ATL.
What's going on, football fans? It's time once again for another rendition of the Pound for Pound. I'm J.R. Clark, and today we're going to talk about COVID. And we're going to talk about how COVID is impacting the NFL. And excuse my language, but the proverbial pissing match that's going on between the owners and the NFLPA. So the NFL and the NFL Players Association. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into that, we do have some real good news. Starting this Saturday, we have two new guys that are coming on and joining the Pound for Pound family. And I really hope that y'all express a warm welcome to them. They're formerly of Down Yonder Sports. I don't know if y'all have caught any of their stuff or not, but it's Jimmy and Mike. They do a real good job there. Me and Toby were on their show not too long ago and just felt a real good connection and chemistry. So they will be joining our channel, and hopefully their first video will be out this Saturday. So we're really excited to add to our Pound for Pound family here. So I encourage y'all, when their video goes out, to give it a watch and give it a comment. If you're new to this channel, obviously like and subscribe and comment and all that other good fun stuff. But I won't drag on too much with that. Now, another bit of good news is that the Atlanta Falcons have finally signed all 6 of their draft picks. Now, I wondered since the draft what was the holdup, and it really appears to be the holdup was, are we even going to have a training camp? That seemed to be the holdup. As we drew closer to their date of July 28th, and it looked more and more these past weekend that we were going to have a training camp, the news came out real quick that they got all of their draft picks signed. So it really just seemed like they wanted to make sure that we were going to at least attempt to have a season before they were guaranteeing anybody any kind of money. So that was really good to hear and really good to see. I like the fact that without much fuss, we got everybody signed, everybody's under contract, and we're all good to go now. Which yet is another sign that we're at least going to have a season, or at least, attempt to have a season, depending on how this COVID stuff really breaks out. Now, let's get into some of the things that have been going on. Leading up to this point, you didn't really hear much coming out, and then all of a sudden, you heard that the NFL owners were wanting the players to take part in basically putting some of their salary in an escrow to try to help with the financial impact that is going to be felt in this season. And I thought to myself, I'm like, man, that's not going to fly at all. But that was the first stages of what I feel like had been playing out behind the scenes that we didn't know, right? It started to break into the court of public opinion as the NFL owners and the NFLPA started to use their network. The NFL owners using NFL Network, the guys like Rappaport and Schefter, to break their news and get their message out there. And then the players doing what they always do, they took to social media and to combat some of the message. This is where all this kind of business stuff gets a little ugly, in a sense of having this stuff play out in the court of public opinion as they lob jabs back and forth at each other until they finally come to an agreement. We saw the same thing happen with the new CBA. Leading up to the vote of the CBA, it was all the stars were basically saying, well, how could we ever accept this deal, and da-da-da-da. And then, boom, bam, once they realized that they weren't going to get a better deal, they signed it and we moved on. And it's kind of the same thing that's happening right now. Early on, it didn't seem like that there was going to be a season or, training camp or what have you, because it didn't seem like they had much protocol put into place, at least on the NFL owners' side. Well, they finally started to let some of that structure slide and let some of that structure out into the public with, testing daily, and for COVID-19. Some of the early stuff that you heard going on was like things like they put a cancellation on swapping jerseys at the end of the game. Like, you just spent 60 minutes, game minutes, out on the field, banging heads with each other, tackling each other, and you worried about swapping jerseys at the end of the game? That seems extremely silly to me, and that, rightfully so, got called out by a lot of the players, talking about how that was just absolutely ridiculous. But they're not going to swap jerseys, I'll tell you that much right now, because at the end of the day, this all comes down to a gigantic CYA for the NFL owners, because they don't want somebody coming back in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, and have a concussion thing all over again and start suing folks. I mean, that's what all this is all about. It's all about money. It's all about the almighty dollar. That's what all this is about, and anybody who thinks any differently is sadly mistaken. And the reason why I say stuff like that is because this past weekend, for sure, you had a social media blast from the players talking about, hashtag we want to play, all from, from Russell Wilson to, JC Treader. I don't remember seeing any. Oh no, I did see a Falcons. Todd Gurley posted stuff about it, with that hashtag. You saw a ton of these players posting about, like, you need to have these safety standards and all this other stuff, or we're not going to play, or there ain't going to be a season. And all it was is bluster. And the reason why I say all it was is bluster, and I ain't trying to pick sides here by any stretch of the imagination. If you've been watching me long enough, when it comes to like the negotiation side, business side, I ain't picking sides between the club and the player, because both of them need each other, right? If it wasn't for the team, the player would have nowhere to play. If it wasn't for the player, we wouldn't care much about the product, right? I mean, we've seen that with the AAF and the XFL trying to restart. If the quality ain't there, we ain't watching, right? So anyway, so what I'm getting at is that these players talking about, we want to play, and talking about, I got a pregnant wife at home and all this other stuff. All right, yeah, I know you do, and I feel for you on all that. But almost all of y'all have had workouts with your boys. I mean, we've seen videos with Cam Newton and McCole Hardman and Calvin Ridley all out there on the field, wherever they're practicing at, and practicing routes and all this other stuff. We've heard about Matt Ryan having his passing camp out in California with Hayden Hurst and Jones and Ridley and all those guys. And I can almost guarantee you, and I'm so not trying to be like a blowhard here, but I can almost guarantee you ain't none of them have masks on. Ain't none of them worried about social distancing. Ain't none of them worried about hand sanitizing. So forgive me if this whole we want to play rings hollow. Because all it really comes down to is that what the NFLPA was pushing for initially is they didn't want to play any preseason games. I remember back in the day, Michael Strahan, after he retired, he said his last season that he ended up getting fined like $100-something thousand or something like that because he didn't go to camp and he didn't play any preseason games. He said that was the best $100-something thousand he ever spent. And if he knew it was that easy, he'd have been doing it his whole career. This is the sack leader, man. This is the single season sack leader saying that if he'd known that he could have canceled camp and canceled preseason and just paid his way out of it, he'd have done it. So, yeah, these players don't want to play a preseason game. And I don't blame them. All this preseason is good for, in my opinion, is seeing what you have on the bottom end of your roster. All it's good for is getting these rookies some live popping pad experience before the games count. Like, most of the time, you don't even get your veterans out there. So, no, I get it. They didn't want to play a preseason game. And as of today, it sounds like that they're going to get their wish to not play a preseason game. Sounds like the NFL has sent out a proposal to not play a preseason game and have a 21-day basically onboarding process, right? The first week that they're back at camp, have like testing daily, and you have to have something like 2 negative tests before you can even start to do a physical. And then, from there it goes to, so many days of just doing walkthroughs. and then so many days with just your helmet on. And then I think it's like day 20, day 18 or day 20 before you ever get to full pads. Okay? So the players want a longer acclimation process, or time to get reacclimated, because you got to remember they ain't been in the facility at all this whole time. So you didn't get OTAs, you didn't get mini camps, you didn't get nothing like that. All right. So what you're looking at there is they want a longer acclimation time, and they want no preseason games. And it looks like they're going to get what they want. Now, the financial stuff that the NFL wants is still yet to be determined. They're still working on that. Like, because the NFL has taken a massive hit financially with this season coming up. And anybody who thinks they aren't is just, fooling themselves. You got the vast majority of the stadiums already announcing either 20% like capacity, or in the case of the MetLife Stadium, they've already come out and said that there'll be no fans there in 2020. And that may even carry over into the 2021 calendar year. So you can say what you want to, but that's a big loss of revenue for these owners. Because if it wasn't, they wouldn't build these ridiculous stadiums. They would have stadiums half the size, and half the cost, really. So this is a big hit. And if there's one thing I know about businessmen, they don't like to lose money. So they're going to try to mitigate their losses. And I can't say that I blame them. And anybody who wants to blame them, y'all don't know much about business. And I'm not sitting here claiming I know a ton about business. But number one rule in business, make money. Okay? If you're not making money, you're wasting your time. So what the NFL owners were trying to do is spread out that hit. They wanted the players to absorb some of that hit. Well, now, that ain't going to fly. The players ain't going to take that, right? The players, they already feel like they don't get enough of the pie, right, of the profits. So they definitely ain't fixing to take a 35% pay cut, which is what the NFL initially came at them with. And so I believe I saw a tweet, and if I can find it, I'll put it up. But I believe I saw a tweet talking about losing $70 million or so this season. That's quite a bit. So these years upon years of seeing the cap go up and up and up, that's going to halt for a while once they figure out how to spread out this hit, which is what they're trying to do for this 2020 season. Instead of taking a massive lump, instead of taking a massive hit, they're going to try to see if they can't spread it out. So go ahead and expect that next year the cap ain't going to be as high. So they're going to have to get real creative with this money. So that'll be interesting coming into next season. But now, some of the other aspects that are being interesting is that it seems like the rosters are going to be limited to 80 people in camp. Normally you start with a 90-man roster. Doesn't seem like they're going to want to bring as many people to camp. I'm guessing that they're wanting to limit exposure as best they can, which is interesting. I don't see how 10 less people is really going to limit exposure. But the other interesting part is that they're talking about potentially putting in an opt-out clause where if a player, just like Major League Baseball, and I even think the NBA did it, is that the player could opt out of the season. And I think if they decide to opt out, they leave the money on the table. But if they opt out, then, if I'm not mistaken, what they were talking about today is that they can't be traded. Or they can be traded, but they can't renegotiate. If they decide to opt out of this season, they can't renegotiate next year. Okay, so that's going to they're trying to prevent people from, players from holding out and using an opt-out as a way to hold out, right? Like your Ngakwe down there in Jacksonville, a situation like that. Him deciding to opt out and not play and try to get, renegotiate. So it'd be interesting to see how that transpires. The money part of it is going to be fascinating as far as what they do. Do they actually get the NFL players to take some of this burden? Which I'm gonna go ahead and call it. I don't think that's right. I don't think they should. I like I said, I don't side with the players or the owners when it comes to financial stuff. But in this one, I think it's wrong for the owners to ask the players to shoulder some of this burden. You don't ask your employees to shoulder some of this burden. At least my boss hadn't. The only way he would do that, or they could do that, I guess, it would be to limit my hours. Now, which would suck. Or I guess, some people have, taken pay cuts and stuff like that, but nobody likes to do that kind of stuff, and that's essentially what you're asking them to do. And with already as much hang-ups as we have, as players have with the revenue share, they're not going to do it. They're not going to give up any money, and I can't say that I blame them there. So, as we got right now is there's going to be testing every day, and at least for the first week or two, and as these tests come in and as these tests come back, they'll take a look at the percentages, and as long as the percentages are going down, they'll broaden out the test of when they test, right? So the other thing that I found really interesting, I've seen some images floating around of a football helmet that has a mask built in. And some people have scoffed and been like, oh, well, how are they supposed to play with that on? You got to remember, man, a lot of these guys play with big old mouthpieces, right? With the fangs and all this other jazz. And yes, there's holes for them to breathe through, but you're not breathing as regularly. So I think by putting a mask in there, if they feel like that's going to help, and if they feel like that's going to be safer, then I hope that they go that route. Because at the end of the day, I want football. I want football back in my life. And when I first started pulling research for this video, it didn't look like we were going to get it. And then in the supposed 11th hour, a lot of stuff started shifting. A lot of stuff started coming out that the NFLPA and the NFL come together. They felt better with their protocols that were in place. Now you got like I said, you got the whole "we want to play" hashtag on Twitter, but I think that was more of a push to try to get out of a preseason game and not play preseason games, which I feel bad for the undrafted guys who may not latch on somewhere else. But other than that, I think those are the only guys that are really going to get hurt by it. And they may do something along the lines of expanding game day rosters and stuff to make up for that. So we'll see how all that goes. But that's what I got for y'all. I appreciate y'all's time, and I appreciate y'all's consistent support that y'all show this channel. And like I said, give Jim and Mike a big welcome this Saturday when they post their first video.
Suck this, my